So we are now recording, and it is July 23rd. Can you believe that? 2020. It's just after 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And this is one of Panda Consulting's deep dive workshops. And it's a little bit of a misnomer. Really what it is we're just taking one subject, and that's the subject we're going to be talking about from this point forward is here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go and go a little bit deeper into this subject, show you little tricks here and there, all sorts of parameters about this. All right. So I just wanted to make sure we get an understanding. Let me start off by saying this. On the recording, I, Frank Conkling, am not a model builder expert. I am not a model builder expert. I would rate myself marginal at best. All right. And I explore things. I'm not an expert. We're going to go over some things that I've implemented, some things that I've learned, but there's other things that I haven't even touched yet on models and models builders. But I want to sort of share with you what I've seen, what I've heard, and what I've used inside of Model Builder, inside of ArcGIS Pro. I hope you also have questions and about Model Builder. All right. So let's go ahead and start. By the way, Tamara, stick around afterwards. I will show you how to go and make the dark theme out there. All right, on ArcGIS Pro. Matter of fact, I might even do it now because it's real simple. But so let's go ahead and start. Okay. See Corey from Southwest Florida. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's go ahead and start. So this is work or model builder. And the first thing you want to do is you want to recognize that inside ArcGIS Pro, it uses certain default parameters. And so one of the things is that in order to go and work inside of ArcGIS Pro, you need to have a couple of default geodatabases. All right. And usually it requires a default geodatabase and it requires a default toolbox. All right. So where does that come from? If we go over to the project tab and then go down to options, the first thing we're presented with is the current settings. All right. In the current settings, it has both the name of it, where it's located, the home folder, the default geodatabase, and that's where everything is going to get stored. But also it has a default toolbox, and that's the toolbox is going to look for when we're going and working on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I go to my folder, and which is the deep dive folder, and then I've got another folder here, which is my current folder, and inside of there, I'm going to create a new toolbox. Now, we tend to work on a project basis only because we work with so many different clients, so that we focus these things and we put everything that deals with this individual project in that same area. But you may find that you have one just on a shared server location, or even on your individual drive. That may be sufficient for you. So now that I've gone and created a toolbox here, I'm going to go back here to project, and I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to set my default toolbox under here, under here, under here to right here. That's going to be my default toolbox. Now, one of the reasons why you do that is that every time ArcGIS Pro opens, if it doesn't find, and it's individual projects, once that project opens, if it doesn't find your default toolbox, it creates one. So not only could you define default.gdbs all over your system, but you could also find default toolboxes all over your system. So it wants to have a default toolbox. If you've got one set and you open it up and it doesn't find it, it creates it. So real quickly, Tamara had a real question on here. It's like, okay, well, right now I have dark theme in place. So how do I set that? If I go over to, let's start this again. If I'm in my map, I go on my project tab, go down to my options, and under options, I have general under the application, and there's application theme, and on there is light and dark. When you change the theme, you have to restart ArcGIS Pro for it to take effect. Matter of fact, if you'll see that, it'll say, oh, you got to restart it. You got to restart it. All right. So for it to take effect, but that's all you have to do, and it automatically will do that. All right. Now that I have a default geodatabase, I have a default toolbox in here, I'm going to go and open up ModelBuilder. And we'll play around a little bit with certain things in here, show you some tips and tricks. Overall, the quote project I want to do today is I have a ArcGIS Parcel Fabric sitting here, and I have publication data structures over here. All right, and I just want to go and experiment. How do I build a model to take from one structure and put it into another structure? This is the standard ETL type model. If you want something else, let me know and we'll explore it. But right now, I think we've got more than enough items to talk about to fill up this hour and a half. So let's start. So how do I get into ModelBuilder? If I go to Analysis, the Analysis tab, and there is ModelBuilder, the third one over. All right, ModelBuilder will open up and it will create a model. By default, it will create a model. And if you look, it went into my default toolbox. So if you go and open up ModelBuilder and you don't see it, you don't see a model in your toolbox that you created, it means that you have a different toolbox set as your default. All right. So before we do anything else, let's go up here and look at the properties of this model, because by default, there's a couple things in here. What's the name of this model? I'm just going to call this ETL1. All right. And when I hit OK, if I'll note, it doesn't rename this. It renamed it. It's the name. That's the name of the model file itself, but it doesn't appear that way. So I have to make sure that I call it ETL1 here. All right. And then save it out. There it is. All right. This is now ETL1. So still, before we get started, I really want to go over a couple more things. Environments here. We want to make sure, again, that we've set our default model or our default workspace so that now it will go and automatically go and write anything we want. This is our current workspace here. This is the scratch workspace, so that every time we go and write something out, it's going to write into there. You want to set the default geodatabase, which so that it has your current workspace and it has your current scratch workspace on them. All right, this is important. I can tell you from experience, if you don't do these steps and don't check them, you'll be writing things and you'll be running a model and it'll be writing out results and you don't know where they go because it's writing them out to those workspaces. All right. So this is new interface. Again, new model, save as. The properties I already showed you. Environments is where you set the environments. So now how do we start doing this? The first thing is always you want to look for and pull over those sorts of tools that you're going to be used, because really a model builder is nothing more than a collection of tools and what you want to do. And previously what you'd have to do is you'd have to go over to geoprocessing, go to your toolbar, find those things. Not anymore. All right, now I can simply go and click inside here and start typing out the tools if I know what that is, all right? And when I click return, it will go and put that tool into my model builder. Nice little trick on here. So what I have here is now two tools. This is the tool. This is actually the output of that tool. So on this tool, if I look at this and I double click it, there's a couple things I have to be aware of. One is that this wants to know what layer, and I've got to be careful when I'm saying this, what feature class am I going to delete everything out of? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a model that says, A, take an existing feature class, clean it out, and then take your Parcel Fabric information, make sure it's going to fit, and then load that or append that into that cleaned out template, that structure that you just built. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, where is this feature class that I'm going to go and be cleaning it out? And there's two ways to go and locate a feature class inside of here. If I pull this down here, this will show me the feature classes that are in my current map that's in my workspace at the moment. All right. And that's nice and handy. But what that means is that because that reference is from this map, in order to run this tool, I have to have this map open. All right. Usually I will tell you to not do that, but rather go and open up and actually locate this on, this is publishing, and this is parcels. All right, go ahead and locate it on the actual location of where it actually is. All right, so this, I'm now going to go and I like to try to document this originally, and I would call this maybe original published parcels. Okay, so if I look at this element and say, I can make this a parameter, which means that when I go to run this, it will always prompt me for the location of that or include a default version in there. This is my delete, and I'll rename that to delete parcel features. And here is, I'll rename this to all right, so this is, in fact, the input, this is the process, this is the output on that process. All right, everybody comfortable with this? I can validate this. If I want, I can run it and it will actually clean this out for me. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. Notice I actually have that feature class loaded into my map document and it locks it. By the way, I wish for you to start asking me or telling me, how in depth do I need to get? Is this too fundamental or what's going on here? This gives me a normal error saying that you've now emptied out. This is an empty geodatabase now, or an empty feature class now. All right, and if I look at this, there's nothing in there now. All right. So Luis says, will the original feature class remain? Yes, it will. It will remain. It doesn't change it at all. This tool does nothing but take anything you have in there and clean it out. Again, we want that empty structure because we're going to start putting things into there. All right. And again, this is sort of classic on here. So one of the things I'm going to show you is that one of the nice things about this is that I can document, or I can make it easier to read my model as I'm building it. And this is a really simple model, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select these elements of this one tool, and I'm going to group them together. All right. And on that group, I can then go and rename that group. All right, so one of the nice things about this, and again, this is a super, super simple model, is that with a group, I can go and expand it out, or I can go and contract it. Now, personally, we have models that have about 110 steps in them, all right? And there's specific groupings in them, and so we will wind up going and grouping them so we can identify what it is and what it isn't in there and such, and be able to go and deal with it in that way. But this is the first step in there. So Mark, then it's impossible to identify the original tool. All right, so again, Mark, inside of ArcGIS Pro, it's changed dramatically as far as how to do things. And I'll show you in a little bit. The elements on there these are actually properties of these elements inside the model that you can search for, you can filter out, you can do all sorts of things with them. It's amazing, the transformation, how much more effort they've put into this here. All right. So first simple step, boom, clean out what you've got right now. Then the next step is I want to go and I want to take my parcels out of my Parcel Fabric. And my Parcel Fabric over here, I've got a layer called taxes. Now that layer contains all of the tax parcels inside of here, including current and historic tax polygons. I only want the current ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go actually over here and I'm going to type out it, and I'm going to go and make feature layer. All right. I'm going to make a feature layer. Now a feature layer is a way for me to go and bring a feature class into my model, but also I can go and do a select against that. And I'll show you all the options I have here. So if I right click here, I can say, let's go in and sort of create some parameters in here. So I want to know what is the feature class that I'm going to be pulling in here. I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to say this Parcel Fabric, Parcel Polygons. Now again, if I want the option to be able to go and change that, I can always go and right click and say make that a parameter. A parameter is a way for you to go and not have it hard coded, but be able to change this if you want to go and rerun this again, but point it to a different data set and such. All right. So I'm going to double click on here and locate. Again, I'm going to locate exactly database here. This is the publishing portion of it. I want to go to here. This is the tax polygons on here. All right. Let me go and rename the actual element here, which is the geoprocessing. And this right now, we're just going to call this loaded parcels. All right, so in here, this tool now allows me to go, and if I double click on here, it brings up my dialog box that says, okay, here's the layers that are going to be input. Here's the output layer of what it's going to output out, because it is going to create, at least in the model, an output layer. And now it says, okay, so what do you want to load up? What are you going to be using in here, on here? All right. So all of these options here, if I keep them visible, if I keep them on there, they become part of what's loaded up. So I can tell it to only load up certain attribute fields on them. But the biggest thing about the make feature layer is this option to be able to go and create a select expression against there. And I can say, only bring in where, here it is, where retired by record is null. Now, for those of you that aren't in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, there's a way that you differentiate between current parcels and retired or historic parcels. Current parcels have here, have it where the created by field has a value in it, but the retired by field does not. If the retired by record field has some value in it, that automatically becomes, if I go down here, that automatically becomes a retired record. All right. So inside the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, it is, in order to get current tax parcels, what I need to do is just do and apply a query against that layer saying, okay, only bring into this model those that are not retired, not historic, so they're all current. And then I can tell it, okay, well, what fields am I going to use here? And I mean, I can just say, I don't care about the misclosure ratio. I don't care about whether or not it's a seed. I don't care about any of those, so that's fine. So what that's going to do is now, when this model is run, it's going to go and load them up into the model. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to load them into this empty schema here. All right. So in order to do that, what I do is I do the next command, which is called append. Okay. Now let me go and zoom out a little bit so we can see this. This is the append command. So what the append command does is it loads features into another structure. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say take this output and load it into this. That's going to be where I load it in. And when I double click this and say, okay, here's what's coming in is the loaded parcels. And then I have to tell it what's going to go out. In this case, I can take this one, come over here and say, that's my target on here. All right, that's my updated target feature class. Let's go and rename this and say, all right. But if I look at these, I look at the schema for my tax polygons, and if I look at the schema for here, come on. So here's my Parcel Fabric polygons. Here is my publication. I got a whole lot in here, which means they're doing a join. By the way, this is a Wisconsin county. They are doing all sorts of street information and everything. With this one, I don't have that join data, so we're not going to be able to do that. But there is a difference in the schema, all right, that I have to be aware of when I load this. Because when I run this model, by default, it says, there's a test here that says the schemas must match between what you're going to load in and where it's going to go. And that's not the case. Instead, what I have to do is I'll have to say, using a field map, figure out what goes where. All right. In 2.5, this only shows you the ones that don't match. All right, I can repeat this and say, go ahead and refresh this again, refresh this again. It only shows you what doesn't match. But in 2.6, you actually can see all of them in case you need to do any modifications. So in this case, I have a parcel ID here. Well, the parcel ID in the published models is actually equal to the name field in the Parcel Fabric. So what I'll do is I'll say here, okay, go ahead and add the name field and make that the value that gets stored in parcel ID. And I could do the same thing for tax parcel here if I want. And yet let's just call it that. Go ahead and make sure you click on that add on here and do that. And what happens is you go through this and you make sure that all of these go and match. Again, there's a whole bunch of attributes here that's in this publication that we don't have. Once you're happy with it, then you can go ahead and click OK. Almost done here. So if I think about this, this one deletes out. This one then goes and loads them up, make sure it only has the ones I wanted to select, and then it goes and loads them into this thing again. All right. But don't I have to make sure one thing gets done before the other thing? I have to make sure the sequencing of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to take and connect up this line to here and, oh, not to there, to there. I have to make sure that it gets emptied before you even load up the other ones. So now I'm going to make the empty a precondition to this. All right. Almost done. Go in here and select all of this, group it, rename it, rename this as all right. Now I don't have to group. Again, this is a tiny model. I don't have to group it, but just for clarity, for somebody else coming behind me, it might not be a bad idea to do that. I can also do some more things in here. For example, I can create a label. Oh, sorry. I can create a label. And on that label, I can say, oh, sorry. All right. Now, again, from somebody who's had to be doing models for a really long time, it's always good to document what the model does. You can even document sort of what it's looking for. Do we have any questions about this yet?
I don't know enough to ask any freaking questions.
I hear you. So I'm going to go and validate this. Make sure I have no errors in here, that it still works. So let's go ahead and run this. All right. And it's going to show me in red what's running, what's in place there, and as it's going through. So I can go and test this. If I actually move this over, I can see that right now it's actually going and doing the append onto here. So Jennifer, you're asking, how do you add that layer again? Or how do you add that label? All right. So to answer your question, Jen, over here inside the new Model Builder pane and the ribbon, there's actually now a label function that goes and adds nothing more than a piece of text that you then can go and right click on it and type out whatever you want on there. All right. I can also take this and make it bigger, move it around. I think there's also some parameters on how it works, but I haven't done that. But yep. So there's the label, there's a model. Let's look and see if it actually worked. It did. It took the parcel ID and took the name values and put it in there. It took the tax, the name values, and also stored those in the tax parcel ID. All right. Okay. Super simple model. But believe it or not, this is one of the more helpful and useful models when you're putting together and dealing with things like going from one structure to another structure and how you go and do that. So by the way, I should mention a couple of things in here. One, this is ArcGIS Pro. This is not ArcMap. So that if I have a calculation that's going on, and let's go and do that. Let's tell it to go ahead and now, once we've done this, once we've done these things, let's move this up. Let's move this up here. Once we've done this, let's go ahead and take those parcels and do some calculations on them. So if I open here and look at this, I can see, all right, maybe we want to go and build in a tax roll year here. So let's look at the type of value this is. This is a text string, 10 characters long. All right. So let's add the next part to it, which is, all right, let's go and do a calculate field on here. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to calculate that tax roll value into 2020. I just want to use this so that we can show you how this thing happens. So now I'm going to say that what we want to do is we want to go and take this and make this input field here. So that now, and just to show you here, when we go and do this, it's going to say, okay, here's your parcels. Here is all your parcel values. So what are we going to make it? We're going to make the tax roll year. And I'll just use Arcade. And we'll say, let's go ahead and calculate this to 2020. Right? Let's verify that that Arcade value expression is valid. Hit OK. And let's go and rename this. Let's rename this.
Frank, it looks like someone has some feedback right now. Can you mute everybody, please?
I can. All right. Sorry. I unmuted. I muted you also. All right.
No worries.
Okay. Yep. Sorry about that. All right. So we've gone through and done this, and because I hooked it up to, because I use the loaded values in my intermediate data as my input into my calculate, it's not going to execute until that's done. Let's go ahead and do auto layout here just so that we can see how this will be better situated. Again, if I really want to be, I can go ahead and group this together. I can take this and rename it. All right, and I could do auto layout again. Again, I could have a series of calculations that I want to do there and put them all in place. All right, validate it. Let's go ahead and rerun this. First thing it's going to do is it's going to clean out the existing one. Once it's done cleaning it out, it's then going to go and append the new data in there. Once it appends the new data, it's then going to go ahead and calculate that one field out for me. While this is running, because it does take a little while to run. Do we have any comments or any feedback on this?
Nothing yet.
Okay. That's your fan feeding back, Christopher. And again, this is a pretty simple tool, pretty simple model on how to do this, but it gives you some of the sort of sequencing of how to set this up. By the way, let's talk about the colors on here and what these various things mean on here. By the way, it's giving me feedback. It's go ahead and executing the append. Then it's going to execute the calculate value here. All right. So it's using, by the way, the labels that I put in here. There I told this append. This is calculate these values in here. And that's what it uses to give me the feedback on here. All right, so just to verify it, let's finish, open this thing up. And here's our year. Now again, things like that calculate, I could have had to do anything I wanted to do. I could have say add this up with this and divide it by this. I could have, because we're using either Python or Arcade, I could have told it to go ahead and drill down and intersect against, for example, maybe I want to know what type of wetlands this parcel has. And if I have a wetland data set, I could tell it through an intersect Arcade into a feature data set to go and say, intersect this and tell me what wetlands this parcel is in, how many acres of this type of wetlands and this type of wetlands and such. I could do that. All right. So we're good here. All right. So let me go show you some interesting things about this. If I go here to properties of this model, so each of these things that I've put in place, the original parcels that I went and said, let's choose them, and then the parcel polygons on here, these are listed as parameters. If you look at my model and zoom in here a little bit, let me get in here. just so that we can see this. And if I look at this one here, it has a P next to it, meaning it's a parameter. It allows you to go and select this. If I go and run this not inside the model, but if I go and run it out of my model here, if I were to go and double click here and say, open this one. I guess I didn't save that yet. Let me go and save this, sorry. Let me save it. Now let me open it, and it will have my parameters in here. The two parameters in here. The original one is, okay, where is my original published parcels? And then here is my tax parcels, my Parcel Fabric one. So I can go and pick those if I want, or I can go out to catalog. So if I want to rerun this set of instructions over and over again, I have that option to be able to do it. But there's some really cool things in here. For example, if I go to properties of this model and click on parameters, this will list the parameters that I have stored in here. And the sequence, the order in which they are shown is the sequence I have here. So I can actually go and change the sequence here on that. I can also, if I go over here, go over and tell it what type of data type is it doing, because parameters and variables inside Model Builder have specific data types on here. I could create a variable of a string or a feature layer or a feature data set. There's all sorts of data types. And when you're first starting out, you'll sometimes get into trouble because you'll have the wrong data type if you create a variable and try to use that. And I'll show you how you might use a variable in here. All right, and then things like a filter. Well, I actually can create a filter on here to tell it, for example, that the layer that I want to select, don't show me all layers. When I go to pick the layer, only show me the polygon layers on here. All right. Same thing here. I can go and say it's a feature data set, and I only want to see the polygon layers in here. So I can tell it what types of layers on here. Now, the other thing, it's not a variable. All right, so I can go ahead and click that. So now, let me go and save this. So I save the properties of this model. When I go in here and say open, and I go and I say, okay, now show me these. Notice it's only showing me polygon feature classes here. When I go here, it's only showing me, if I go to the Parcel Fabric, it's only showing me the polygon feature classes that are available inside of this collection. So I can filter down and limit this a little bit more to make sure that whoever's going to run this in the future, they don't put the wrong types of things in here to go and do it. For example, also, if I'm setting up a parameter and going, for example, to take my parcel features and write out point feature classes, and maybe I'll do that also on here, I can tell it what's going to come in, what's going to go out, and filter it down on that. All right. So let's say I've got a really big model here. All right. And I mean, again, we in Panda, we've got some models because we do statewide parcel acquisition. We've got models that have 110, 100, more than that, different steps inside of those models. So in order to find a model, it's difficult sometimes. So what you can do with this is you can now, within ArcGIS Pro Model Builder, you have the ability to say, well, just show me the things that are inputs, and it will show me the inputs that I have because I only have 2 inputs here. Or I can say, show me the outputs, and here's the outputs on these that are going in here. I can say, show me the parameters, and it will just go and find and show me the two parameters that I've got on here. I can say, well, show me the tools that are being used on this. In this case, I have no other tools. I've got some built-in tools. These are the tools that I used for my model. If I had script tools, it would do the same thing. I can also go and say, I've got something out here. I've got an element on my model. By the way, each of these things are called elements. I've got an element in my model. I forget where it is in this model, but I remember it began with AP. There it is. Where's that append thing here? And it will go, and it should, when I hit enter, will go and select it for me. So it will zoom to and select elements on here. So I can, with Model Builder in Pro, I can do things like only filter out the things that I want to see when I want to go back and edit these, or do searches on them and zoom into them. So if I know, for example, on that 110 step model, that I've got something that calculates the Department of Revenue's land use codes, I can put in DOR code and it will automatically take me to that element inside of here. Really useful. If there's more than one, for example, if there's more than one of these parameters, I can step through them and it will go and switch back and forth between them. I don't know who did this, but boy, I really like this. This is nice if you're modeling and you've got a whole bunch of elements in your data model. This is a really nice improvement. This is very, very nice. All right, so let's look at something else here. Right now we have in here, we have one that says, let's go ahead and calculate this value here. But what happens if next year you want to go and you do the same thing and you don't want it to say 2020? You instead want it to say whatever year or whatever input you put in there. Remember that tax year is a string field that's 10 characters long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go and create a, let me see where I am here. Here it is over here, a new variable. And I'm going to make it a string variable. All right. Again, that's a type of variable we're going to have. And I can tell it, do I want to be able to add multiple values in here? And this might get a little bit deep, but sometimes you can go and have values that are input on multiple things. There are several of the geoprocessing tools that will take, for example, deleting fields. Delete fields allows you to have multiple fields loaded to it. And variables are acting the same way. In this case, I just want this. If I wanted to say, well, let me choose from a table of values, I can input that lookup table and do that. Well, now, there it is. So let me go and rename this thing and call this tax year. All right. The tax year, I'll make it a parameter again. So that now when I go to run this, and if I run it from the open, it will prompt me, what is the tax year that you want to have calculated in that string? So let me go back here. When I go to calculate, I go in here. In this case, I'm calculating 2002. But instead, what I want to do is I want to do what's called in-string variable substitution, excuse me, inline variable substitution. So I want to go and put tax year in parentheses around there. All right. And make sure, maybe it's not Arcade. Maybe Arcade won't let me do this. There it is, tax year. Oh.
Did you say in parentheses?
No, I think it's here. Thank you. Yeah, I needed the delimiter. I think I could have used the delimiter on Arcade also, just to check. If I do that, that is valid. Yeah, I just didn't have the parentheses in here. The quote, not the parentheses, the quotes on here. All right. So now I say, okay, now let's calculate this so that it's going to input in there whatever value I store in there. Okay. Let's go ahead and save this out. Let's run this. Again, let's run this from over here. So now I have, there's my original one, there's that. So now I can tell, what do I want this to be? Maybe this is 2019 values in here. All right, and I can go ahead and hit run, and it will go ahead and run. So variable substitution is a really powerful tool. You can take that and use that to do everything from, so again, I'm just looking at Mark. Can you default the prompt for the current year? Yes, I could, so on here, I named it there. I can, then that appears here. So I can go and say, put the current year or the year, whatever in here, whatever I put in that variable name, that's what appears on the parameter. All right. So let's see here. That was good. Did we finish? There it is. So Mark, yes, the name of the parameter, in case you forgot what year it is, it's interesting, Mark, because you're now going to go and say, hey, what happens if I want to do a date stamp on this? All right. So you can have it prompt to go for specifically for that date. There is, however, a little trick on here, in that I can tell it to go and put a date stamp in there. All right. And a date stamp is sort of like a variable substitution, but instead of using the ampersands, all right, let's go in and take this out. Let's cut that out there. Let's go here again. And instead of doing that, I could tell it parentheses T parentheses. Now again, I'll just let it check this. Go ahead, OK. Save this thing out. Once I saved out, let's go ahead and run this. All right, no, it doesn't have the parameter anymore. When it goes and runs this, that %T is actually a code for it to go and do time stamping in there, and it'll go in and put the time in there. Now you could parse that out, that timestamp. You could parse that out so it only gives you year or whatever in there. But yes. Oh, sorry, it didn't do that. That was something that I had just recently found. And maybe it's supposed to be here, in which I was told that it actually would do that. No. Supposedly you can. I know you can do that definitely with Python, and you should be able to do that with Arcade also, to go and find the specific year and go and put that in. So with calc field, it's whatever you can calc it out, again, using Python or Arcade, different scripts on there. All right. So sometimes, by the way, I keep jumping around. I'm sorry about that. So we were talking about, well, what do these different things mean? Well, the blue ones are the input. The blue are the inputs as far as what you're going to input into the model. The yellow boxes, those are the actual processes. Those are the geoprocessing tools or other models, because you can actually put another model inside of this model if you wanted to. But the yellow boxes are the processes that are going to run. The green is in fact the output. Now, if this output is connected to something else, such as this one right here, this is called an intermediate output. All right, so that it will go and take, and it will not create a feature class, even though it might have a tool that does, but instead leave that sort of in memory and let you do that. So this will go ahead and the intermediate data will be left as it is. It's only the final ones that are actually going to be written out to disk for you. All right. Again, this is intermediate also. That will be written out to you. So you can look at a model and see where's your inputs, where's your processes, where's your outputs on there. Okay. So an interesting thing is that in this case, I have a whole bunch of stuff coming in here. This is actually, if I zoom in here, this is my layer that gets loaded. All right, this is just loading it into an in-memory things. But if I were to have a tool that normally would go and export it out, for example, let's say that the Parcel Fabric has parcels that should be merged together. All right, so that I normally would run a dissolve tool in here. So the dissolve goes and creates a new feature class when you run it. Maybe I don't want to run that dissolve out because maybe I have to do more things with it. So if that output feature class is temporary, I can tell it to go ahead and store that, not to disk, but store it to memory by going and inputting a parameter in there as far as the output. So let's see if I can figure out what to do here. Let's go and create a new feature class. It's called feature to point. All right. So feature to point. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this feature class and I'm going to, take this and I'm going to load it into there. That's going to be my new, that's going to be the new, because in addition to calculating that, I wanted to go and create label points on here that are centered. So I'm going to look here, I'm going to say, okay, what parameters do I have for this tool? This tool says, all right, go ahead and take these inputs, create a new feature class, and this is going to be a point feature class, and put it in the center or put it inside that polygon. So again, I can tell it parcel management, parcel publishing, and let's just call this parcel underscore labels. All right, and I want it to be on the inside. Let's make that a parameter again. All right, if we're smart, we'll go in here to properties, go to parameters, go here, and say, because that is a parameter that you're going to be able to choose in the future, let's go ahead and filter that's only going to be a point feature class on here. Save this out. When this runs now, again, make sure I save it out. When I run this, all right, it's going to go and take the original, clean out the original ones, load these, do those calculations for me. By the way, let me go and correct this thing here. Just going to fill something else in here. All right. And then it's going to write about and create a point feature class here for me. So as you can see, a lot of Model Builder involves just sort of working through step by step by step what you're going to do. All right. And then sort of figuring out what steps you want to do. Now it's building, it's going and executing the points for me. When it gets done, it loads up these points. So when I go in here, here's all my points. When I go and open up the attribute table on these, here's the attributes for all of those. Full attribution, but they're label points now. Again. All right. By the way, that had me think about something here. Under my environments, I want to make sure that, and it may be under the geoprocessing that I have to do this. Yeah, I think it is under geoprocessing, where I tell it to keep overwriting these things every time, just to make sure that it doesn't give me an error that in fact it exists, so you can't write it out. So again, simplistically, that's the elements of a parcel fabric, or excuse me, it's the elements of a model builder model. Well, what can you do with this now? Well, once I laid this out, maybe someone wants to know, well, how does this thing work? Well, it turns out that inside of Pro, there's this new thing called a report. And this will show me and tell me exactly what is set on here. By the way, I noticed I misspelled empty here. So here's my variables that are set. Here's my processes and what it's going to do, what the messages are going to be, whether or not it's going to be give you a warning or not. Here's the parameters on this. Here's the make parcel layers. Here's the append parcel layers. Here's the calculate the field. Here's the feature data set. Oh my gosh, what I wouldn't have done in ArcMap to be able to go and document my model just like this, so that I could go and debug this and figure out what the heck is going on and what's happening here. So by default, if I turn on auto sync, it updates this record every single time I run this, just to make sure. All right, so I can actually keep track of what's going on with my model by reports, figure out what's going on, what ran, what it was doing, that sort of thing. What was the state? Here's, for example, here's the field mapping for the append. And it says, okay, here's what's being loaded in here. And again, I can go through this. Here's the ones that are being loaded and being substituted. Steve said, what are the export options inside of that report pane? Interesting question, Steve. I don't know. So here it is. So export. I can export this out as an XML file. That's about it right now. But in here, I can, for example, I can view my inputs, only my inputs, my outputs, my parameters, my tools, the errors that I have on here, or just view them all on here. But I don't see where I can go and do much else with this other than export it out as an XML and then just load it into an XML viewer on here. That helps a little bit, Steve, but I don't know whether that was everything you wanted. But yeah, it's, for those of us who do models, this is, even just at this, to be able to go and bring it into XML and then go and view and see what's going on here. And it kind of makes sense because this is really just documenting what this whole thing is doing, the individual processes and such. All right, let me go down from there. So once I have a model, then it also gets interesting because there's some new things here. I can say, take this model, all right, and export it out to a Python file. And let's go. Here's ET1 Pi. All right. So we went and wrote it out there. Let's just open this in. Yeah, not there. Not what I wanted to do. So there's some interesting things the way ArcGIS Pro, now it writes out a model in that it goes and documents much better what's going on here, where this model is stored, such. And let me get back here. If I have variables in here and I don't have a whole lot of them, it goes and sets, for example, the environments up here. For example, here's a variable that says go ahead and overwrite output on here. Here's the process where with the actual Python script of what it's going to do here. Here is the make layer, which is loading the parcels, and each of these are specific functions in here. It has a global environment setting for you, and depending upon how you set up each of these, again, this is a really simple model, it would have individual environment settings for each of these functions as you're doing this. This is a much cleaner Python script than used to be written out of ArcMap. They've really taken a hard look at the way they write these things out, and it's so much cleaner as far as what it's writing out. Python scripts. But there's another interesting thing here. So I can take this model and I can say open. So down here, if I open this up, all right, I can go and say schedule this. And if I go to my, oh, here it is here. Duh. Here, this is the model, the actual task. I can tell when to bin. I can tell it when to do it, one time, to do it daily, weekly, monthly, repeat it every so many minutes, do it until a certain one on here. I can use the scheduler and run it on this machine so that if I have an ETL that I'm doing and I put together a model for it, I can tell it to just go ahead and run that once a week, once a night. When I've finished, to automatically go and update this. So it automatically updates the published data sets that I've got in place here. The scheduler is really nice. You can tell it when to begin and such. So just to clarify, this is using ArcPy and the model here, but it's not running the Python version of this. This is actually running the model builder version of it. All right. What a lot of administrators will do is they'll go and take a model, write it out to Python script, and then use the Windows scheduler. Now you don't have to write it out to Python anymore. This now will run that model inside of here so that you have ability to go and clean this thing up better. For those of us that are not Python experts, this is really, really nice. This is great that you can go and do this. All right. One more trick. All right, so I'm going to go, and by the way, there's a history here now. And history is showing me every single thing that, all the geoprocessing that I'm doing. So it tells me what errors worked and not. So I can go and create a new model, all right? And I can take, these are a couple tools that I did in history. I can take those and drag them over, and the history of the geoprocessing that I've done, it can actually create a model out of my historic running this, so that if you're really not comfortable doing this, you can run the scripts, run the geoprocessing tools inside of ArcGIS Pro, take the history and drag them over. So for example, yeah, I want to do those two here. Maybe this one maybe I got to bring in here too. So I'll go and I'll bring that in, and that might have had some other elements on here. I can go and set these. So it can give you the beginning of a model just by taking what you've already done with the geoprocessing tools and dragging them into a model, testing it, making sure it's working, setting up the preconditions of when it's supposed to work, when it's not supposed to work, all that. This is nice also. Very, very nice for those of us that are sort of just beginning to try to figure out how to go and do modeling on this. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go into something really deep, things that I barely even touch very often. So I want to leave it open. Do we have any questions in here? Have we clouded everything? Have we just made it really no longer clear? We've just, wiped out every iteration and everything as far as what you've got. Tamara's nice tool. Just trying to see how you convert it, copy to a Python script. Really nice. Yeah, it's so. Just sort of to let you know, and again, this is a horrible. I'm going to take these out, delete these out. Here's my model. Literally, all I have to do is go up to export to a Python script and call this, junk.python.py. Boom, it wrote it out. And if I go in here and go in here again, they wrote it out clean. So they've done a really good job. Yeah, really good job. Okay. I'm not going to save that. All right. Any other questions yet? So let me go in here and talk about some more advanced components of here, because there's lots of things I didn't even touch on here. So what happens if I want it to go through and I've got a bunch of things I want it to go through? For example, maybe I have a bunch of folders that I wanted to go through and find all the polygons in there, polygon feature classes in there, and aggregate them together and do all sorts of things. Well, they have things called iterators, all right? The iterators are sort of ways that you can loop things together. all right? So that you can say, go through and continue doing these things while this condition is valid, or iterate through features that I've selected, or iterate through rows that have been selected inside of a table, or iterate through feature values, or iterate through feature data sets that are out there, or feature classes, so that it can do certain things with different feature classes. Iterate files, rasters, tables, workspaces. So there's an iterator in which you can go and put that in. This is a pretty advanced function in here. Not pretty advanced, it's a very advanced function. I've tried it a couple times. I've had some successes, but you really have to know what you're doing on this. But for those people that do, this is really cool that you can go and iterate. There's one thing you have to be aware of. Every model can only have one iterator in it. So you can't have two iterators going on at the same time. It's only one at a time per model. Something I can live with. Under utilities, there's some new utilities there that are specific to Model Builder. So I could tell it to go and take a variable and calculate the value of that variable just by putting this additional tool inside of there. There's calculate values, collect values. So maybe I want to collect something and I don't want to go and export it out. I can have it sort of store those values for me. Get the field value of a certain field without doing much. I can parse the path. So if I go and collect a variable that is a path, I can then go and parse out what's the actual workspace in there, where's the files, where's the path to it and such, and I can actually select specific data out of there. These tools that they've put in here have built so much upon what there was in ArcMap. It is pretty amazing how they've got there. Logicals, okay. Now there's inside of ArcGIS Pro data, inside of ArcGIS Pro Model Builder, there are now logicals that you can put in here so that you can test something where if the data exists, or if a field exists, do this. If it doesn't exist, do this. If the selection exists, if the coordinate system is this, if a data type is this, if a feature type is that, if a field value is this, if a row count is this, if the spatial relationship is this, is a value, there's branching built into Model Builder now. A lot more than I want to get into, but there's a whole lot in here for this. All right. Again, even though this was a deep dive, this was barely, this was down far enough that your Apple Watch is still not going to be, null and void. Your warranty on it is still good. We only went down about a meter. That's about it on this. So there's a couple other things in here that I want to go and at least point you to before we're done here. I wish I could get you access to these, but I can't. So this is one of the sessions at last week's virtual, come on, there we go. Welcome to this session on Model Builder Advanced Techniques. My name is Shakrish Mehta. Yep. So there is the Advanced Model Builder, and this is the regular Model Builder. All right, tips and tricks. These were, oh, come on, shitty. These are two sessions that were presented at the virtual conference last week. These are great sessions. She is really good at it. She's a member of the team. This first tips and tricks contains a lot of the things that I just went over, sort of a refresher of. There's little things inside of here that you should be aware of, little things that'll make it easier for you when you're building your models. And then this other one here, the advanced, come on. The advanced techniques, This has got some things about iterator, inline substitutions, some of the logicals, some of the other tools in here. This has got some really good advanced techniques if you want to get into how you really can go and build models and do some amazing things with them. So often there's a question of, well, okay, models are cool. Models are really good. When do I use a model? All right, when do I use a model? When do I not use a model? So if you have a process that you wish to run over and over and over again, doesn't mean it has to be the same day, but you want to run this same process. It's a set of repeatable tasks or tools. A model is good for that. So isn't that what a task is? You know, a task is a set of repeatable tools. The difference is a model is run against the entire data set. A task is run against specific features that you select out. So again, on a macro level, you want to do it in a model. On a micro level, you probably want to do it in a task. All right. You can still have some of these parameters, and you know, it's kind of confusing because you can mix them together. But for the most part, if you're doing it against everything inside of a feature class or everything inside of a data set, use a model. If you're doing it against just a couple things here, a couple things there, or you're building new things, do it as a task if you want to go and repeat it. All right, we're almost at an hour and a half for an hour 25. I'm going to unmute here. Do we have any questions? Any questions on this? Most people, I think, stuck around. There's a couple of people that left. Let me unmute you, Christopher. So I don't see any new requests in the chat window.
Nor do I.
All right.
Oh.
Okay, good. Good. Thank you, Tamara. I was hoping to, because my next comment was okay. Was that deep enough for most people? And I think most people just sort of have a general interest in models, don't use them a whole lot. But once you begin to go and understand what models can do, it can really save you time on this. I wanted to go and at least demonstrate it on a simple one, just sort of to go from there. So then we have a question. What do we do next month? By the way, there is no workshop next Thursday. For those of you that are coming to every week, none Thursday. I actually am at a surveyor's board meeting, so I'll be unavailable. And Chris and Brian said they didn't want to go and do it. I'm teasing. I didn't even ask them that. So, yeah. I like, personally, I like the changes that have been made in ArcPro Model Builder. It's really good, really nice, really nice. They did a great job on this. Everything from documentation to being able to go and group things and see how they're working and generating reports and exporting out to Python. They've solved almost all the problems that they had with the old ArcMap Model Builder. They've really got some great tools in here. All right. If there are no other questions, I will go ahead and stop the recording and we can go ahead and open it up for...
Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.